Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast where we use storytelling and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. We believe that athletes are so much more than their body, sport, and training miles. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Sinders. We are endurance athletes, physical therapists, and huge coffee addicts. We spend most of our time treating, educating, and working with endurance athletes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now let's get to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to More Than Miles. Today we have Dr. Jen Davis. She's a physical therapist turned healthy mindset coach for athletes. She provides mental and emotional support for injured athletes and athletes retiring from their sport. She helps injured athletes reclaim their happiness and feel like themselves again.
Jen has been a friend of mine for years at this point. We were roommates in PT school, and she was such a joy to actually have on the podcast to share some of her experiences and her expertise. We cover a lot of ground in this conversation, including athletic identity, mental, emotional wellness when injured, or quite frankly, when not injured as well, and how this work really is important for life and not only sport. So I know that you guys are going to love this one, and it's useful no matter where you are, if you're healthy or not. But if you're injured at the moment, this is the perfect episode for you. Today, we have our good friend, Jen Davis. She's going to tell us all about what she does because she's doing some really incredible work working with injured athletes on the mental, emotional aspects of things. Jen has helped me through my own personal and athletic struggles. I mean, countless times at this point. And then my other thing that I really appreciate about Jen is that she would always go and get ice cream with me in PT school, regardless if either of us had eaten dinner or not.
Butter and cream.
Yes, many a trip to butter and cream.
Yeah.
So welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
I'm so excited to be here.
And I am really excited to see your lovely face as well. It's been quite a long time since I've been able to see you, and you were in Atlanta. And I also have some fond memories, but they're usually of the two of you in the front of the classroom during the endurance athlete course. Lots of questions and lots of fun. So I'm glad.
How do I do it right, Kate? Tell me all the answers. I want to be perfect.
Yeah, that's about right. So you're saying that I was only 99% right?
Yeah. I wanted that 105 on all the exams.
That's all right. Now you're not quite like that, I hope.
No, I have turned a new leaf.
The recovering perfectionist, right?
Absolutely. I think all three of us might know a little bit about that.
All three of us are. And I'm getting over it, but I'm still a little bitter that Kate lost my final exam because I had questions about what I got wrong.
Oh my God. A year after. No, I did not lose it. I had kept everything for a year, but it was more than a year after the class ended that you asked me to see your exam. And I thought, why do you want to see it now? I don't even know where it is.
Okay.
I threw it out exactly 1 year in case.
Oh, man.
I know.
Well, timing's everything, as they say.
Yep. All right, so let's get started. So Jen, what we want to do and what we always ask everybody is to kind of tell us their running story or your sports story so that our audience can really get to understand who you are and where you come from and start to love you as much as we do.
Cool. I have a soccer story and a running story. The soccer story started first. I begged my mom to sign me up for soccer when I was like probably walking, maybe like 2 or 3. And I grew up playing soccer. I was on every like top team in our little tiny town. So that's not really saying much, but I eventually knew I wanted to play in college. So we stepped up into the big leagues and I played Premier. And at that point in time, like soccer really became a defining factor in my life. There are so many great things I learned from playing this sport and other things that I am still discovering as an adult that we'll probably touch on. I really learned to have a super ginormous love for soccer all the way through college. I'm like a 5 foot tall human. So I had to work my ass off to prove myself in college and earn a spot on the team. And my first 2 years were defined by like incredibly hard work and a lot of disappointment. And like, what am I not doing right? How many more hours do I need to spend on the field, perfecting my skills so that I can actually get some time on the field? And then finally, I earned a starting spot in my junior year. It was our third game into the season. I played for 15 minutes. And then I was pulled without any explanation. I continued to not get any answers or explanation from my coach. And I'll say that I was expecting to receive one without actually asking her. So there is that part. I'll own that. The weekend passed. I was mulling over it. I'm like, WTF. I finally earned my spot. And then like, I don't even understand why I'm not like, I didn't even get to play for most of the game. So I marched into my coach's office on that Monday and I was like demanding answers. Okay, what happened? Why did you do that? And she was like, well, you weren't the right player for that game. I was like, okay, can you translate that? Why not? And she said, well, you're not fast enough. And I was like, oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went out to practice and guess what I did? I ran my ass off and then I tried to show her how fast I was. And think about like a 2-hour soccer practice. You're basically running full field sprints for the entire 2 hours because you're trying to prove yourself. And then the last drill that I participated in, which was towards the end of practice, was a transition, like switching drill. So we had to switch the ball across the field as fast as we could. And one team was on defense, one team was on offense. I happened to be on defense and I was chasing. And all of a sudden I turn, pivot, pop in my knee, fall to the ground. I was rolling on the ground, yelling F-bombs because the pain was real. And I saw the athletic trainer come over, coach come over. Everybody had puppy dog eyes because they knew what happened.
For our audience, we know what happened. Yes. What injury was that? It's a pretty devastating one.
Yes. I was taken to the training room and my athletic trainer tested me for a positive ACL tear. Cue the waterworks. I was bawling on the table. Like I said, I had worked my ass off for 2+ years to earn that spot. And then 3 games into the season, I lost that whole season. Fortunately, it was my junior year. So I had my senior year to come back and show everybody that I'm a boss. And that's what I did. I had a really big carrot to chase and I had a ton of support around me. I had athletic trainers, physical therapists, my coaches, my parents, the rest of my family, my friends, teammates. I was on the sideline every single day, still involved in the sport. And I had to learn how to be a great cheerleader. I had to cope with the feeling of why does everybody else get to be on the field and play? And I'm the one over here who's injured. Like, why me, you know? But I made it back and I crushed my senior year. I had my best year ever of soccer. I played my heart out. We made it to the NCAA championship and it was absolutely the ending to my college career that I would have wanted because I knew I left everything out on the field. There was nothing left. So soccer was still a part of me. I knew myself to be a soccer player and an athlete my whole life. Fast forward to PT school and I still want to play soccer. So I play rec co-ed soccer, super fun. You play with a lot of people who just want to compete, but also laugh and have fun with it. And I tore my second ACL in my first year of PT school. And that was a wildly different adventure for me. I ran into physical complications after the surgery. I was also sitting in classrooms for almost 8 hours a day without access to physical therapy care or athletic trainers, or even having time to go and treat myself whenever I felt like I could. It was definitely a lot different. The physical complications led to more surgeries. And I also knew, having already known a little bit about PT, ACL injuries, and injury risk, because your greatest injury risk is the fact that you've already had one. So I was on my second ACL tear. I was well aware that I was choosing to enter into a career that was physically demanding. And I felt like I was in a place where I had to either choose to take a risk and still play in a sport that gave me tons of joy, or let it go so that I could focus on my career and stay healthy. That was sort of the initial decision. I decided to go with PT, and I was really, really caught off guard by the sort of emotional disaster that ensued afterwards. I was in my first year of PT school. I felt like everything around me, like I was kind of just shrinking as I watched the rest of my life pass by, because it seemed like everybody's life was moving on in great directions. And I was over here throwing this huge pity party for myself, being like, what the hell? This wasn't supposed to be my story. Why me? I was actually dating a guy that I was sure I would marry at the time. And
I've been there.
Yeah, probably worked out for the better.
Yeah.
Super awesome
100%.
person. But I do really love the direction that my life went in instead. I felt like I was drifting more away from him. I was drifting away from friends. Like I actually remember friends sitting me down as like an intervention and telling me that there was something off about me. I needed to get some sort of help. And the hardest thing is like, I knew these things, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if or how I could help myself. And I wanted to get out of the pity party. I just didn't, like, the hole felt so big at that point that I didn't even know where to start. So I just continued to like withdraw. I had learned that sharing all of my grief with other people only seemed to be pushing them away at the time. That's what my perception was. And I also felt like nobody wanted to hear my story anymore. They were all tired of it. So I retracted and didn't want to be a burden to anybody else. So I just held it together, tried to keep my shit together every day. And it eventually got to the point where I just had trouble, like even peeling myself out of bed in the morning. Grades tanked. I felt alone. I had no idea what the rest of life was going to hold for me. Like it was a very dark time for me. And then I think I actually got to a point where I was like, I don't even think this could get any worse. And I'm so young. Like I still have so much life left. I need to figure something out because everything I'm trying to do is not working. So I did get some help. The universe dropped a really awesome mentor and friend in my lap who helped me discover that what I was going through was an athletic identity crisis. I knew myself to be an athlete. Athlete was like a mega source of joy, but also self-worth and validation and sense of community, like friendships. It was literally my everything. And so it would make sense that if I lost that, I would also feel like I was losing myself. So she helped me to get back on track with the mental and emotional part. And then once I started taking those steps, my recovery, my physical recovery also was getting better too. And that's where I was like, all right, I need something new to train for. Can't play soccer. So let's try running. I want to run a half marathon because that's a badass goal. Let's check that box off. And I did. Like I lived with an awesome roommate at the time.
She was okay, I think.
She was,
I don't know. She was okay.
Yeah, she was just all right.
Just all right.
Who also happened to be a great runner, was very driven and like always had either a formal or an informal training plan. But she helped me get on track with running as a routine. It also turned out to be a really great stress reliever during PT school. If I sat in a classroom for 8 hours, you bet I was going to come home and run before I did anything else. And running became my new love. Is a is a stretch, because I think runners would agree that running can be a love-hate relationship at times. You know, like you're on that run and it doesn't feel good. And you're like, damn it, it's been like 2 weeks and I haven't had a feel good run. Like, why do I keep doing this to myself? And then all of a sudden you have that magical day and you're like, wow, I could go forever. This is the best sport, right?
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember those bad days now that I can't do it anymore. I'm like, only remember the good, you know? I kind of pushed away all those really early mornings and hot days, I think.
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure. We block out what we don't really want to remember. Makes sense.
I was definitely there this morning. I had mile repeats this morning, and after the third one, it was ugly.
Right.
And I was like, okay, when can this be over?
I remember running track, and I'm like at the starting line thinking about every other uncomfortable thing I would rather do than go and run this race. Like, to the point it's like stabbing my eyeballs with paper clips.
Okay, so that's a really great place to jump in about mindset coach.
Yes. Yes. Fair. Yeah. So I had, during my ACL recoveries, I had, especially that second one, I was starting to piece together that there was something about the emotional component of the injury that also was related to the physical part. Like, when I started peeling myself off of the floor and paying attention to my emotional and mental stuff, that's when I started making strides in the physical recovery too. So I noticed that about my process. I also noticed that it was something I didn't know how to do myself. So at the time, the universe dropped a gift in my lap, which was my awesome friend and mentor, who helped me to figure this stuff out. And that's now the role that I play for athletes too, because it was so life-changing for me. So I actually pursued more of the emotional component in PT school. I loved sports PT. I thought it was going to be like my absolute favorite dream job in my career path. And I was lucky enough to start there, which was awesome, but still felt like something was missing. In PT school, I did like a thesis per se on the emotional and psychological component of sport. And that's really where my coaching journey and my brand started.
Jen worked so hard on that thesis. We were roommates at the time, and there were just articles everywhere and books everywhere. And
I still have them.
And you were so passionate about it. And I just loved seeing how excited you were about it. And I knew it was going to take you somewhere really, really special. And of course, we know where that is now, but I remember how all in you were. And I went to the presentation that you did, and I was like the proudest friend ever.
Yes. Thank you for that. It became my mission to fill that gap that I had observed in traditional PT practice. I had seen in some of my clinical rotations, especially in sports medicine, where, case in point, there was a repeat ACL tear, 14-year-old girl, soccer player. Clinical instructors like, oh, you're going to love her. She has such an outgoing personality. She crushed her first rehab. And then she comes in and she's a deflated balloon. And like, my heart hurts for her because I feel it. I had been there before. I actually was there at the time because I was still recovering from that second ACL injury. And I knew that my CI did a great job listening, but action beyond that was missing. And for me to have been in those shoes, I was like a firm advocate that we can do better. So my mission for my thesis was to make this link between emotional, mental, and physical more clear to practitioners so that we can learn how to recognize signs that somebody is struggling, know what questions to ask, and then also feel confident referring them out to somebody who is capable of treating and serving that side of the injury, because all of it is intertwined. If you're a PT and you want really awesome results for your patients, we can't ignore the emotional piece, because especially in my story, and for most, I would say, athletes will say the mental stuff is harder than the physical. We got to start there. And they're all linked. Yeah. So I practiced sports med PT for a few years, still felt like something was missing. still felt the knocking of my heart of following coaching. And that's where I am today. I have started my own healthy mindset coaching business that serves injured and retiring athletes specifically. And I help you to move through those transitions, whether they're planned or unplanned, figuring out who you are and who you are outside of your sport, because that's really where a lot of the shift has to come from, and knowing that you are more than your sport, because that's often where we feel stuck.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually my tagline,
Mm-hmm.
which is so funny, is that we're more than our physical body and more than our sport, because it's so true. And being an athlete that's been through that and losing my sport and really having to make that shift and realize that my athletic identity was so tied into my sport, I couldn't function outside of that. And then going through the process of, okay, what are the tools and the toolbox that I need to build so that I can function? And then figuring out what to do next was very hard. So from a personal perspective, I completely understand and empathize with your story, and also really love that you're out there doing what you're doing, because there are so many athletes in this position, and it's something that we don't talk about on a regular basis. So what I'd like to do is unpack some of the things that you said in your story, if that would be okay, because I think that one of the points, mostly athletes and then some healthcare practitioners listen to this podcast. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is athletic identity. The fact that most athletes have an identity, and it may be strong, it may be weak. So they may only, see themselves as partially an athlete, or they might think their whole world revolves around it. And wherever you lie on that spectrum is going to impact your injury and recovery process hugely. So if you could kind of dive into that idea of athletic identity for us, that would be incredible.
Yeah, awesome question. I love it. So athletic identity is really interesting. When we think about identity in general, a lot of us are led to believe that our identity is what we do as humans. So if we're growing up, it could be the sport that we play, the role that we have as a sister, a brother, etc. And so some of us can super latch on to our role in sports. And there's a lot inside of that, because sports help to define us in some ways. They play into the belief systems of how good or valuable we are as people. And if we're impact players on the field, we might have a confidence boost that also carries us off the field. We have our community there, so people who like us and think we're important. So the identity piece, it's definitely a part of like societal grooming, I'll say. The good thing about that is that we can learn differently. That's how we discover who we are outside of the sport. But it can be something that's really hard for athletes to see beyond if they can't see that they're stuck there. And so when you bring up this spectrum of like attachment to that athletic identity, you're totally right. It is heavily correlated with how much an athlete might struggle with an injury. And research actually indicates that the higher the athletic identity, meaning the more an athlete is attached to their role in sports, the more likely they will struggle with an injury when it happens. It also happens to be, and it makes sense when we think about athletic identity and that relationship, that elite athletes, professional athletes, Olympic athletes tend to suffer the most when they do get an injury. And Kacy, you and I actually were just talking about this the other day. Athletes at this caliber, their sport has become almost their livelihood, like almost everything in their livelihood. It's who they are in a public face. It's the way they generate income. It's the way they relieve their stress or get that confidence boost or like challenge themselves and say, yeah, I'm a badass and I know that I'm still capable of doing these things. It's so much. So when you have a career-ending injury or an injury that threatens your ability to participate in your sport for an extensive period of time, it can be a very disorienting place to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the things that I like to work with my athletes on is building a bigger toolbox so that should an injury occur, whether it's, an injury that lasts for a few weeks or a month or a catastrophic injury like mine, like, what are they going to do? Who are they outside of their sport? And what tools can they look to when they no longer can run for stress relief? Mm-hmm. And so I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about what those tools are that you like to give your clients, or what are some of the tools out there available that they may not recognize?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also a really good question. And I quickly want to tie this into PT first, because when we can give our athletes these tools, when they feel like more themselves, they're more willing to participate in their rehab program. When they're completely lost and distraught, like everything falls to the wayside, no matter how much they want it to work. So these tools are crucial. A good place to start is having the athlete learn what it means to self-reflect, or to even recognize like what the heck is going on inside. Because so many of us, and I'll say us because I've just shared with you, I've been there on multiple occasions actually. We have a hard time actually figuring out what we're moving through because we've learned not to pay attention to it. So the first part is becoming aware of what is actually bottled up inside of you, because that is hands down usually the thing that seems like is keeping you stuck, or in a way, like I felt like I was paralyzed or suffocated by this like heavy weight of, I had no idea what at the time. And when I learned to be still could be like, I'm going to sit down in the morning, or if my head is racing at night because I can't stop thinking about how long I've had this injury and how long the rest of my injury process is going to be. And oh my gosh, what if I never get my sport back? Maybe I'm killing myself out of bed. I'm sitting on the couch and I light a candle and I could just meditate. That could be one easy thing. You light a candle, you watch your fireplace go, and you're just allowing yourself to have all of the thoughts and all of the feels pass through you. That's barrier number one, for barrier and like this secret weapon for a lot of us, because we have so been taught as athletes to just stuff it and to man up, slap your game face on, and power through it.
That's right. And this one tool that you've just mentioned is not only incredible, and I use it too, but it's also very hard to initiate and very hard to allow yourself to do that. And so I want to say that out loud, because people are going to be like, yeah, right. Light a candle and sit in front of it. Sure. I'm an athlete. I don't do that crap. And the reason I say that is because that was me. And a lot of my patients will say, sure, Kate, you want me to meditate? What is that going to do for me? And of course, luckily we all know, so we can give it to them, but it's a hard place to start, but it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think meditation too can also be it can feel like a vague term to a lot of people. Like, oh, I'm just supposed to sit here. I've even had clients who've been like, I've been meditating and I just cannot, like, I just feel like my mind's going all over the place. And I'm like, that's great. You're doing it perfectly. That is your human lizard brain that is wanting to take place here. And you don't have to like shun the thoughts away and say, no, you're not supposed to be here. In fact, what actually works better is, thank you for coming. I'm going to return back to my breath and my body, and I'm just going to feel what it's like to be here right now. So it's a practice. The other thing about athletes is that we're really used to being good at things right off the bat.
Yes.
The hard part about starting and initiating this, like you're saying, is, well, if I don't even know what meditation is, and how can I be good at it? Or like, I'm clear on what it could be. It could be lighting a candle. It could be sitting with some sort of quiet music on. It could be journaling. Maybe you know how to do those things, but you're like, oh, I'm not good at it. It feels super new. So I'm just not going to do it.
That's right. And then the other piece that I loved what you said was sitting and feeling your emotions, not stuffing them down. And I wanted to call that out because I think, again, you're totally right. Like, absolutely right on. It's one of those things that you have to do. And if you don't feel it, it stays in you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It makes me think of the Frozen movie, where she's like, her parents had been telling her whole life to conceal it, don't feel it. Yes. And I'm like, no, it's so backwards, right? Because when she learns how to feel it, it turns into love and like everything's unfrozen. I'm like, this is perfect. That's like literally what happens.
You're so ready to be a mom, Jen.
Yes. I have a husband who is very devoted to all things Disney. So
that's funny.
We're lucky to have him.
Okay. So I interrupted because I thought we should expand upon those thoughts. But what other things do you feel like are in your toolbox?
Well, like I said, awareness is number one, because I feel like that has to be in place for us to move forward. If we can't become aware of what we're feeling and what we're thinking, then it's really hard to unlearn and relearn different patterns that are keeping us stuck. So the way that I like to teach it, it's very similar to, I think it's called the internal family system, something like that, where we all have multiple parts inside of us. We have our little kid, we have our inner critic, or like our punishing parent, and then we have our like spirit highest self, which is our truest, most authentic us. When we have awareness, we set ourselves up to learn which one of those parts is driving the bus at any point in time. And when we can figure out who's driving the bus, what stories we're hearing from that part, and then also step into courage and actually think about what is more true or what is actually true instead, that's where we can learn to let go of some of the stuff that's keeping us stuck, or to repattern the habits or the thought patterns that keep us in that like really dark hole of despair that we feel like we can't get out of.
Yeah.
So that's what I do, like in the coaching realm. The mindfulness stuff is huge. Like I cannot emphasize that enough. It could feel hard. It could feel new. It could feel like woo-woo magic that you might not want to get into, but that's where you definitely get the most bang for your buck. It's where you see your fastest results. Other things that I would recommend is like staying connected to what you love. And this is a place for self-exploration too. Like when you're in sport, your sport is the thing you love. You like, how many hours a day did I devote, or a week did I devote myself to soccer practices? I learned to love it, and I learned for it to be my one love. But I have also learned that I am way more than just soccer. There's more of me that loves many more things, like Frozen, Disney movies, right? Like one of the things that I found to be therapeutic was learning how to paint or learning how to draw, like tapping into a different side of me that I didn't know existed, or like I didn't give myself permission to explore, because soccer always had to be the thing that came first, or like athletes and artists don't go together, so we're just not going to go in that direction. But it's learning to like get curious about what lives inside of you, and again, being willing to try new things and know it's okay.
I just wrote a lecture about this, and the biggest thing was be ready to make changes. That was one of the things on the top of how to switch the paradigm. So I completely agree with you on that. I read a research paper last night that was talking about mindfulness and its physiological components and what happens to the body when we use mindfulness. And it was for performance, because that's what I was reading about, but it was talking about how, perceived exertion goes down, time to fatigue goes down, and all of these great things that happen with these mindfulness practices that can happen for people who are injured or just trying to improve their performance. So yeah, you're awesome, Jen. You're welcome.
As I'm listening, the thing that keeps coming up is, like listening to podcasts like this are great. Reading self-help books are great. Scrolling through Instagram posts that are talking about this are great, but ask for freaking help with it.
That's right.
You just listen to this podcast, you're still going to think that meditation is boo-boo, and you're still not going to understand any of this. I'm kind of I can't call myself in the middle. I think you guys are both like a mile, like you guys are in a plane flying above my earth.
Hey, you've had your own very real and valid journey.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have. Also, fun side note, I was for Jen's first client she practiced asking these curiosity questions on in PT school. And so I'm still a project, but that's totally neither here nor there.
You've grown so much. I'm proud of you.
That's what I say every day. I feel like she's grown so much every day.
Oh, I have, but man, it has been, it has been fighting tooth and nail for sure. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Is not trying to do this alone, figuring out what works for you, because there's so many different avenues you can go through, and you just have to discover this for yourself. I think that's something that people don't always see or can really grasp when they're looking like I've got a problem and I don't know where to start. That's the thing. You have to start. That's the first thing. And the second thing is just taking one step at a time from there. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard to do alone. And it's so hard to do without some accountability there. Cause it's just like, some people need accountability to do their workouts. There's certain things that we all need accountability to do. And for me, I have no problem popping out of bed at 4:30 a.m. to go run. Like that's easy for me. But to stay on top of my mental health and to ask myself these questions and be reflective and do it in a way that I could be kind to myself, right? Being kind to myself, it takes practice. It's not automatic. Running is automatic for me, but being kind to myself is not. That's where you need your support, right? That's where you need people to help you.
Well, I mean, that's what we're taught as athletes, though. So what you're talking about is what's ingrained in every athlete is, okay, get up, do the physical work, but we're never taught to do the mental or emotional work. We're just in this world where, okay, it's sitting there, it's a thing. We all know it could help us, but in reality, if we just push ourselves harder, we're going to be fine. And that's the world you grew up in. That's the world I grew up in. And I think a lot of our athletes are in, and it's starting to shift, but it's not there yet. It's safe to say, it's hard. But it's because that's what you grew up and that's what you were taught to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And running is automatic because generally speaking, it's easy for you. Like you already have the method down for running. You don't have to think about it. You just put your shoes on and you go. With the mental stuff, as we all are, because there's no finish line to this type of growth, we're always learning how to make it a smoother process or where to even begin. And it can often feel janky and clunky, and that makes us uncomfortable. And again, we're athletes. We like to be good at things. So if it's not coming easily and we're not succeeding, then sayonara, I'll just go find something else that I'm good at that can muffle that discomfort for a hot second, right? And I love that you're talking about this whole asking for help thing, Kacy, because another thing that I think we learn as athletes is asking for help or saying that we need help could potentially have thoughts of failure wrapped around it. And so we think that we should be able to do this by ourselves. Like if we're asking for help, then there's something wrong with us. And that's actually not true at all. What is really true is that we are all human beings. We're not athletic robots that can just put our feelings aside and not have them. They are still a part of us. And when we can recognize a relationship with asking for help and reframe it into one that's healthier, saying help is not me being a failure or me being weak. It's me actually being strong enough to believe in myself and advocate for myself and choose the path that is actually more efficient than me trying to figure this out for myself for what could be years before we can gain the same amount of traction we would when we sign up to work with somebody for accountability, for guidance, for clear direction on what's coming next. So I love the help discussion. It's another stigma that I think we've all been taught some things in sport.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole discomfort piece too. I mean, I don't know if people can really grasp how uncomfortable this work is, unfortunately. Because until you start to work through it and move through it, you're honestly not ever prepared for it. And I know that all three of us have experienced that difficulty on some level. And this kind of reminds me of like a recent experience I had where I wasn't really happy with the way something went. I had done something in my life. I wasn't exactly happy how it went. And I realized I was so comfortable in not being happy with how it went because I'm typical, very critical of myself. I tend to look for the negatives versus the positives. And that's just what was comfortable for me. And I was like almost unwilling to even entertain the fact that any of it was good, right? Because I was so comfortable in my little, I'm not good enough bubble. You know, a lot of people aren't willing to think through that. And I'm actually I'm reasonably self-aware. So I'm able to at least see all the information. And I know that people have similar experiences. I'm definitely not the only one, but it's just about being open to it and being able to get out of that bubble of what we're used to.
Mm-hmm. I love the discomfort too. When I was working through this stuff, and even now I still work with a coach because again, there's no finish line to this type of growth. I have really learned to become excited about discomfort. I know you probably just heard me say that and you're like, that's totally backwards. How do you get excited about discomfort? But I now live by this learning that I've like plastered on the inside of my forehead. It is that discomfort is the pathway to courage, and courage is where we grow. So if I feel discomfort, I'm like, ooh, what's around the corner here? How can I be curious? Like, sure, I can hear the little Jen in there that's like, oh my God, this is horrifying. And I'm way more comfortable in this place that's still super uncomfortable, but at least I know it's here. And I could like jump to the other side and have something even more glorious if I just choose to like dip my toe into discomfort a little bit at a time. And like, if I'm on a run, think about running through the trails. You know, like if you're on a rainy trail, you have no idea what's coming. You get to see all the turns and the trees and the lakes and the rivers for the first time. And you're like, wow, this is even better than I imagined it would be. But when you do that in uncertainty in life, like when you're trying to get yourself into these uncomfortable places of awareness and self-growth and becoming more resilient in your mindset, it's a lot harder. So it's how can we reframe the relationship we have with help, which is uncomfortable? How do we reframe our relationship with discomfort and turn it into one of like adventure and excitement and curiosity versus, holy shit, that sounds terrifying, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you're reframing each of those for us right here and right now. I remember not that long ago, probably a month ago, I felt like my entire world was just burning down around me. I remember saying out loud, it's like I'm in a burning house right now and I can't get out. And I just sat there and I sat in it and it was awful. And it was just one of those moments like, okay, I've been doing this for years. I've been working on myself for years and it's still coming. And every time it's just as uncomfortable, just as frustrating as it was the time before. But each time I come out, I'm in such a better place. And I think it's a good reminder to tell people, hey, it's okay if you feel like your life is like falling apart around you when you're facing it rather than turning away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you will get through it. Like the house might burn down, but you are strong enough to withstand it.
And I've got some insurance.
Yes. Yes. For beautiful rebuilding.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. That is exactly right.
So Jen, tell us a little bit more about what it's like to work with you. So take us kind of through your process. How do you work with clients? So I'm sure people are listening right now, like, when can I call this girl? So I want them to have an idea of what it's like to work with a coach like you.
Mm-hmm. I might be biased, but it's pretty damn awesome. I'll start off with that. So to get started in the process, you would go through a pre-qualification conversation. What I ask is that anybody who's interested in working with me fills out a questionnaire that would be provided to you, just so I can get to learn more about your story, what you're struggling with, where you want to go, and what's kind of stopping you from getting there. Because what's really important is that we're both a great fit for each other. I want to know that we get to spend our time working together. We're both committed and we're both willing to like show up and bend into these uncomfortable places together, knowing that we're going to rock it all the way through. So that commitment level has to be there for me. We do a discovery call, which is where we have this sort of a conversation to see if we're a good fit. And when you decide to enroll, we get started with private calls, private coaching calls that are 55 minutes long each and happen up to once a week. And that is a 6-month container. I find that with a lot of my clients, we can really gain awesome traction by month 3. And then months 3 to 6 is where we start to see a lot of the really awesome results take place. You absolutely can choose to go beyond that if you so choose. A lot of people find that the support extends not just with their ability to recover from an injury, but it also leads into other parts of their life too. Like when you're discovering yourself for the first time all over again outside of your sport, you might have like this thought of, oh my gosh, I love that. Like I want to ride that train, but I don't really know where it's going. I want this new career path. I have these big goals. How do I get there? So this could be, like I said, these can be pretty lengthy, awesome, loving relationships. What I do is nudge you into those emotional places that you otherwise might not know or be willing to go into yourself. That is why I am your accountability buddy. So we have these conversations. We go to really awesome explorative places. And after each session, I will give you a task or 2. I don't like to give you too much work to do because a lot of it is reflection work. A task or 2 to really implement so that you can start to gain traction with these learnings, put them into practice. And when you do that, that's actually how you start to nip the blocking points or your problems per se in the bud for real, not just like reach for the glass of wine or binge on Netflix until the pain goes away for a hot second.
Jen, we are going to put some links that you send us up on our show notes, how people can schedule with you and that type of thing. But if you have an Instagram that you would like to call out, or if you have a website you would like to call out, why don't we let the audience know how to at least find you here?
Sure. You can most easily find me on Instagram. My handle is I_am_Jen Davis. And Jen is just with one N. That's where I'm most active. That's where you can see a lot more about what I do, who I help, more or less like the approach I like to take with my clients. I also, because I have background as a physical therapist and have learned that this is my path through my own experience with physical therapy, I do also like to connect with providers who recognize that their athletes are struggling in this area and you're wanting to know more about how you can refer those athletes to this type of support.
So thank you for that, Jen. And we'll put your links in the show notes. All right. So are you ready for our final 3 questions?
Bring it on.
Okay. So I'll ask the first one. What is the thing that you regularly do to take care of yourself?
Oh, I love my sacred morning time. I block off a date with myself every morning that nothing else can override. When I get up, I make myself some sort of a warm drink, and then I sit on the couch. I pull some cards from my favorite Gabrielle Bernstein decks. And those can either be great reminders or they can actually serve as journaling prompts for me. The big man upstairs is also like my biggest guiding light in life. So I spend time with him in my journaling as well. And I just take however long I need. And if I have extra time left over in my like 2 or 3 hour sacred time block, I'll read.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Morning routines are really important because it starts you off in a great place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you both have morning routines. I jump out of bed and run and then inhale my breakfast and then go to work. So
that's still a routine.
It's still a routine.
Going.
That's right. And it's because you have one of those bosses that never quits, always pushing you so hard.
Yep. It never ends. Before, afters, after hours. Wake up to text to her most mornings.
That's actually true.
Yes, it is true. All right. So our second question is, what is bringing you joy right now?
What is bringing me joy? Oh, so many things. The biggest one is that I am looking forward to becoming a mommy to our little baby boy, Hudson. So prepping for his arrival and also really leaning into the things that I need to nourish my own self and therefore him. So like going for walks, hitting the trails, just getting outside for sunshine, reconnecting with anything that lights my soul on fire, including the work that I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, Jen, you were ready for that. You were ready for that baby when I saw you in May.
Oh, yes, he's been long awaited.
And the last one is, what is the thing you love so much that you have to do or eat or be a part of on a regular basis?
It's definitely outside. Like I have to be outside in fresh air and sunshine. That has taken a lot of different shapes over the past several years. Like it could have been soccer, it could have been running. Now it's embracing the two legs that I have that can functionally take me on a walk and see the trees and breathe the fresh air and listen to the sounds of the birds and the water. That's my recharge for sure. I can't miss out on it.
Right there with you.
Well, Jen, this has been so fun. Thank you for being on. Do you have any last parting wisdom for us, or are we going to wrap it up here?
I think I just want to echo what you said before, Kace, about asking for help. You absolutely do not have to go through this journey all by yourself. And when you do sign up to be on a team of people who are there for you to support you every step of the way, it happens a lot faster. You find yourself a lot faster and you feel like you have your life back again. So asking for help, I encourage you to lean into that discomfort and get curious and excited about it.
Awesome.
I love that.
Well,
so worth it.
Thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it resonated with you and that you learned something. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps increase our visibility within the platform so that more awesome people like you can find us.
If you'd like to support us further, pretty please, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/morethanmiles. That's www.patreon.com/morethanmiles. Or for a few dollars, you can help the show grow and keep going, as well as receive exclusive perks like monthly Q&As with us. Until next time, remember to run the mile you're in, and that training is so much more than miles.